It is time. It's time to stop hiding. It's time to stand up. It's time for Christians to come together, to share their testimony, to inspire hope, and to join their brothers and sisters as we answer the call. Folks, it is time to wake up the lions. And I have an absolute lioness with me today. I am so thrilled to have this lady back on the program. This lady was one of our first interviews. She was one of the first people who came out and said, I'm going to take a chance on this podcast, even though you're young and you're small and you're fledgling. And she came out and gave us a fantastic interview and talked about herself and her faith and her recovery and her book. And I am so happy to have her back on 1 year later to the date that this is going to come out, talking about her new book, which we actually alluded to at the end of the last interview. She came in episode 11 on our podcast, folks. This wonderful lady who is back with us again today. She's a Christ follower. She's a poet. She's a spiritual director, speaker. She's also the author of several books, including her newest one, Sunbathing, and that's S-O-N, Sunbathing, Basking in the Word of God. Please welcome to our show, Jessica Morris. Jessica, how you doing?
I'm fantastic, Rory. It's great to be back here. Great to hear your voice, one of the best ones out there. I love it. And yeah, it's wonderful. I had no idea where my life was going to take me a year ago, and it's wonderful to be sitting here with you again.
Thank you.
And I love to hear the wonderful things about your show and how it's grown. It's awesome because
Thank you.
I was one of the first ones
You
on
you
this. It's
were.
just cool. Yeah.
You were. That type of stuff has always meant a lot to me when people are willing to say, you know what, yeah, let's just go on. We'll take a chance with, somebody who's, newer. I wasn't new to podcasting, but this show was brand new.
Yeah.
And we were building a following and you were part of that. And, so to be able to have you on now when
Mhm.
we are as big as we are, and to be able to say, hey, I can't wait to tell all these new people listening to us about your newest book is
Mhm.
it's just a wonderful feeling for me to be able to kind of give back to you for doing me the favor of coming on. So
Yeah.
thank you for giving that to me by coming back on the show to talk about your new book.
Oh, anytime, ask my husband. Anytime anybody asks me about the book, I'm all ready to talk about it. So ask away. I'm on
All right,
it.
Jessica, let's you've got several books, and let's start with a little bit about who you are, just to kind of fill people in. Where this all comes from with you and your life. How has God impacted, who you are and where you are today?
Okay, so right now, I would say when we talked about this a little bit before we came on the air, so to speak, I am a child of God. I'm a follower of Jesus, and that's the most important thing in my life today, without exception. It hasn't always been that way, but it is now. So where I came from is that I was born into a highly dysfunctional family that was really good at not letting other people know that for the most part. And I talked about this a lot the first time we met, but the basic gist of it is my father was a minister, and we were Methodist, so it's a denomination of the Christian faith. And my mother was a school teacher, and she and my father were both raised by alcoholics. Both of their fathers were alcoholics. And it just is a recipe for disaster when an alcoholic marries somebody who was raised by an alcoholic. And so my mom was not an alcoholic, but she definitely had the family disease of it, so to speak. She was really good at all the behaviors that come with keeping a lid on it, cleaning up after the alcoholic, all those things. Enabling, they call it. And so that's how I grew up, and that's how I learned to be uh, a woman. There was also a significant amount of abuse that I don't get into, but it was there. And it was physical, emotional, spiritual. It was everything. And so that was a difficult way to grow up. It was a difficult way to think about God because my dad was a phenomenal minister. He was very good at what he did. And I believe without a shadow of a doubt that he was called to do it. It definitely was. God was calling him and tugging on his heart to do this. Otherwise, he never would have done it because it's funny because I remember when I was a kid and our relatives we would be visiting and his cousins would say when he showed up at the first family picnic and said he was going to become a minister, we were all like, what? Because apparently he was a bit of a badass, and so he would not have done it had he not been called to do it. And so he was really good at it, but he was also really bad at being an alcoholic, and so that's just, I mean, take dysfunction however you want to take it. That's what I grew up in. And everybody has a different idea about what it is. It's much more accepted to talk about it today, but when I was a kid, it was not.
For sure.
You didn't talk about those things. Um, so when I went to college, I decided I'm leaving the church because if the church has this kind of person in a leadership position, I don't want any part of it, is
Right.
how I looked at it. And that doesn't mean that I didn't still believe in God. I would offer up some foxhole prayers on occasion. I knew he was there,
Yeah.
and I always loved Jesus. I felt very connected to Jesus, but I also kind of had enough of them. And so I went into very deeply into my own addictions, which I believe I was born with. Genetically speaking, I can't speak to that because I have three siblings and, they're not addicts. So, why am I? And they're not, they have other symptoms, and all that stuff. Um, so while I was in college, I just went deep into it and after college, and God gave me the beautiful gift of people that I could stare directly into their eyes when I couldn't look directly at God.
Hmm.
And these my I still pray every single night of my life before I go to bed. I go to sleep with my gratitude prayers and for the day, for everything. And I always speak to the people, I always say thank you for the people you put in my life who've guided me to you because they have been a phenomenal influence for me. And they're the ones who helped me to see who God really was, is those people that I've come across in different seasons of my life, different places in my life that weren't trained ministers or spiritual directors or, Sunday school teachers even. They were just people who were living their lives for the most part. Some were, counselors, so, the different people, but for the most part, they were people who shared the love of God with me. Whether they believed in the same God I believed in or not isn't even the issue. It's just that they were sharing what pure love and acceptance was in a moment when I needed it. And it helped me to get to the next phase that got me to the next place, that got me to recovery, that got me to seminary, that all the things we talked about last time that you know, led me to where I am today, which is I want to write everything I can possibly write about God and my experience with God so that other people can find their way
Yeah.
easier. And so yeah, so that's I don't remember what the original question
You
was.
did great. Don't worry about it. No, that was wonderful. And I do want to remind everybody who's listening right now, if you want to find out even more about Jessica's backstory and about her first book, and things like that, go back and listen to episode 11. It's still there. It's evergreen for you. So,
Yeah.
listen to that one and this one, and then you can find out all about this fantastic lady. Your story has, it's one of those that kind of grips you and you notice it because so often we hear, um, I was exposed to God from the person who caused me the pain. So I not only blame the person, I blame God.
Mhm.
So I left. And then that is where the story ends so many tragic times. For you to be brought back in to faith in spite of how the faith was delivered to you
Mhm.
is still very rare. Unfortunately, too rare in our world, but it's such a rare occurrence. And I know you give a lot of awesome credit to some really fantastic people in your life. Um, do you feel like you were brought back in? And I think I know the answer to this question, but do you think you were brought back in to the faith that you're in now for a purpose?
Mhm. Yes. And I also don't feel like I ever really left in my heart.
Yeah.
It's weird to say that because there was some really dark times in my life where I felt completely separated, but I was living in my mind for a long time. And that's very different than living in your heart, than living with your heart. And so I I can remember at a very early age feeling pulled to this something. I'm getting a little bit of chill in my arm, so I know I'm going on the right path here. Feeling pulled to this something that I couldn't quite put words around, kind of like right now. I'm struggling to put words around it. But it wasn't in the church where I went. It wasn't um, it wasn't in Sunday school. It was sort of around those things, if that makes any sense. And I'll try to explain that a little bit more because where I am today, um, when I got into recovery, which was, what year is this? 2026. So it was August of 1999. Oh my Lord, I'm really dating myself. August of 1999, I walked into my first meeting. And I all I wanted, my first meeting for recovery was for my food addiction. And all I wanted was to not be obese anymore. I just, I had gone up and down in my weight my whole life. And I didn't want to, I felt horrible physically, emotionally, and spiritually. It was a horrible way to live. It was August, and so it was hot outside. And so, I live in Pennsylvania, and I remember walking into that first meeting, and I just was like, "Where's the air conditioner? I'm just going to sit right in front of that." And I mean, that's what my life was. It was just trying to get away from myself, get away from this person that I had become in my sadness and desperation. And that's living in addiction. It's horrible. Anybody who's ever lived in addiction will know exactly what I'm talking about. I spent a lot of time trying to get away from myself, and it's impossible. Wherever you go, there you are, you
Right.
know. And so I am going somewhere with this. So when I walked into that first meeting, I didn't know it that night, but in hindsight, I see that that thing that was pulling me way back when I was a little girl, and where I was seeking, when I was writing my first poems, I could feel it. When I first got into writing little stories and stuff, it was there, and it was there in that room, and it made me want to come back. It was an acceptance of me exactly where I was in the moment. And I did share this last time, but an important piece of all of this is that I was not planned. My parents, were going for three children. I'm the fourth. And early on in my childhood, my father revealed this to me. And so it was something that I fought against my whole life, you know. And so now, today, when I introduce myself as a child of God, a Christ follower, I was created for a specific reason. Like you asking me, were you drawn back for a purpose? Absolutely. And today, I can say to you, I believe it's to write. I believe it's to share poetry. I believe it's to help other people to feel uh, called to him, right? Because I do believe he calls us all. And it's just a matter of you waking up to the call, kind of
Yeah.
wake up the lions. I mean, we are all so very much walking through this life sort of like zombies. And it's time to wake up and pay attention to the messages that God is putting in front of us. And that's what my journey has been since I got into recovery, because once I put the substances down, which for me were food, alcohol, men, everything, like yes, men were a substance for me. I mean, it was, I got a hit anytime, a guy would look at me a certain way or whatever, and so I had to put all those things down. And once those things were surrendered, it opened up the floodgates for God to just come in and be like, here I am, I've been waiting for you,
Yeah.
and because that's what I want to tell people is that it doesn't matter what happened before you opened the door to God. It doesn't matter, right? You could be living in a brothel, and if you open the door, he's coming in. You could be
Yeah.
living in a drug house. Open the door, he's coming in. It doesn't matter. He's on the other side of the door knocking, and you just need to open it. And that's the message I want to get to people. Stop living in shame. Stop keep your Stop from keeping your shame from keeping you from him, if
Well,
that is making any kind of sense. And
of
I
course.
try to write that way. I try to write the way I'm talking, like in a real I shouldn't even say that I try. When I start writing, I don't even really think too much about it. I go boop, and then, the editor in me will go back and go, okay, you need to, fix this up a little bit here. But for the most part, I just go. And God, well, I'm putting together, and I did share this with you before, but I'll say this again because it's so true, because I'm putting together this collection of poetry that is my next project. And I date all of them. And I am seeing, I've entitled, I've given the collection a title. It's called This Is How God Speaks to Me, because I am seeing wisdom in these poems that I did not have on the date that they were written. Like in 2016, I was in my second year of seminary, and I'm writing about things that I'm just reading about in books now in a way that is so like I knew them. I knew these things then, but I didn't. I did, but I didn't. You know what I mean? Like I knew them. God knew them through me, and he was giving them to me. Everything we learn doesn't come in a book. I'll
Not at
just
all.
stop there.
No, not at all. Amen to all of that you just put out there.
Yeah.
I am looking forward to seeing the poetry book when that gets out and running. But for right now, sunbathing, basking in the
Yes.
Word of God. So I do want to make sure I, tell everybody about the book. And
Yes. Yes.
so this is your latest book. It's the one we
Yes.
talked about last time you were on at the very end of our interview. Tell us about this book, where it comes from, why.
The why is how it started, actually. While I was in seminary, studying, I was in seminary for 6 years, part-time study to get a master's in theological studies, because I wanted to learn it for myself. I had heard a lot growing up, and, lots of people do when they go to church. And I wanted to learn it for myself. So I went. Try telling your husband that when you are taking out student loans to just learn something and not have a job on the other side. Because I
Right.
was like, I don't want to be a minister. I just want to learn this stuff. And he's looking at me like a deer in headlights. you know. And so anyway, thank God, he understands. In fact, when I went, he actually said to me, I told him, and he goes, and I was telling him how I kept feel like God is pulling me to do this, and da 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 da, going on and on about it. And he looked at me and he goes, "Well, you can't argue with God, can you?"
Smart man.
I was like, "That's it? You're not going to argue?" And he was just like, "No, I can't. I got nothing." So.
Great answer.
So yeah, it was a brilliant. He's wonderful. He comes out with gems like that all the time, which I love. But anyway, so why did I start? Oh, sunbathing. Okay, so I'm in seminary and I tend to go down rabbit holes sometimes. So you might
That's
have to
why I'm
pull me
here.
back.
We're talking about
Um,
the book. You're good to go.
the book.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm in seminary and I'm learning all this new stuff. Like I'm learning all this stuff about the Old Testament and different Bible verses and what they mean and what was the setting when Jesus was talking about this and why does that matter? Like all these things that you don't really talk too much about in church. You just go to church and the minister talks and then you go, "Oh, well that was a good line," and you leave and you think, "I'm going to tell somebody the minister said this line." And then it becomes part of your makeup, right? But you don't really know what was going on. I mean, some preachers do talk about those things, but for the most part, they got maybe a good 15-minute window of your attention, right? So they want to get everything in there. So I'm in school learning this for 6 years. And about 3 years into it, I just started writing. I was falling in love with Jesus. And I started taking things that I was learning about, and I started writing little sort of interpretive meditations off of them. So I would put a Jesus saying at the top, and then and I was putting it out on my blog to people. And it was a wonderful exercise for me because, of course, I'm going in and researching a little bit more and I'm learning more in doing it. And I was getting some good feedback from people. And I thought to myself, when I'm done with seminary, I'm going to write this in a book. I'm going to put all this in a book. And then I sort of forgot about it because then I got into the other book that I was here for the first time. And that just that blew my hair back in a million different ways. And so, but when I was finished with that, I, I remembered, or I was reminded by somebody that sunbathing needed to happen. And so I pulled up those writings, the ones that I had shared, and I was like, yeah, this needs a lot of work. And I started to work on it. And that's when my husband said to me, because things were so Higher Powered was released. That was my previous book. That was released in September of 24. And I was working at a place that I had been at for about 26 years, 27 years, I think, at the time. And it was bad. And we had had some bad times over the years. Um, but this was really bad. Like people were getting let go left and right. I mean, it was just kind of mayhem. And of course, they weren't replacing anybody because these were all financial issues. And so I was getting piled on with all this work. And it was just like I went to seminary to stay at this place, because I had had a couple of stints um, doing things I wanted to do. Like I had worked as a spiritual counselor at a treatment facility near my home. But it was an internship. And when the internship was over, they didn't have an opening. And so, I had to go back to the job and so it was like nothing was sort of happening. And my husband just said to me, he said, Jess, he's a little bit older than I am. And he said, I want to retire when I'm 65, which at the time was about 2.5 years away. And that was in fall of 24. And he said, why don't you leave your job and see if you can get this writing thing off the ground? And just promise me that by the time I want to retire, you'll have health insurance. It's like, because I worry about you. He goes, and I remember saying to him, how will we've always had two incomes. Like how will we, and he goes, we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. He said, and then he said to me, if you don't do this, you're going to kick yourself for the rest of your life.
Wow.
And I was like, all right. And I went in the next day and I gave him a notice. Like didn't even think about it. And I am so freaking grateful, so grateful for his generosity. I mean, he works his butt off. He always has, but his generosity in offering this to me, and saying let's just see what happens, and his faith too. I mean, it's a leap of faith for him because from the time we got married, I mean, I met him through Friends in Recovery, and from the time we got married, all he talked about was his retirement plan, and he had been married twice before me. Before he got into recovery, he had some issues. And so I'm his third wife, and he lost a lot of money in those separations.
Wow.
And so he was kind of gun shy, you know. But I can see Rory where, and I'm kind of trailing off here, but this is a good rabbit hole
You're good.
because I can kind of see here where God has been guiding the two of us, right?
Yeah.
Separately and together ever since we met. And I say that because what I just remembered just now that I want to share with you is that probably about when he proposed to me, and it was another 2.5 years till we got married. Like we set the wedding for later, and like neither one of us, we weren't in a rush to have children or anything. You know what I mean? It was so we were like, let's take our time and plan it and everything. It was my first wedding, so I wanted to plan a lot and everything. And so have my princess day, and so in the process of that, he came to me and we sat down. He's like, I really need to talk to you. And we had a conversation about signing a prenuptial agreement. And when he asked me, he said, I really, my lawyers are now my friends because they know me so well from the previous, and they all think this is a good idea. And and he even talked to some of the guys in our recovery program, and the whole thing. So he did all his due diligence and then he came to talk to me about it. And I looked him in the face and I'm like, okay. And he said, really? You don't even want to. I'm like, Dave, I'm not marrying you because I want your money. And if we were not to last, I wouldn't want your money. I don't. And he's like, yeah, but you have a lot of debt. And, because I did when we met, I had a lot of debt and everything. And he's like, and I'm like, Dave, that's not why I'm with you. And he was like, oh, okay. So we're good. We got up and went about our business and everything. So it was about 2 months before the wedding. And I was doing some kind of crazy wedding stuff. I was like in the middle of, I don't know, centerpieces or something, that detail oriented job. And I had all this stuff spread out in our office. And he came in and he goes, I need to talk to you. And I'm like, okay. And he sat down and he goes, I don't want a prenup. And I was like, what? I told you it's no big deal, because we had the scheduled with the lawyer to go sign the prenup. And he goes, I don't want it. It came to me. I don't want an out. I don't want an out. I want all in with you. I want all in.
Oh.
Of course, I started sobbing.
Mm-hmm.
But I, of course, was like, well, I'm in the middle of my wedding, so, like, and I just was like, oh, that's so beautiful, and everything. And this is how God works for us,
Yeah.
works in us and through us, and he's been doing that ever since. We've had really hard times. We had a period where we separated because it was after COVID and there was just, he was living in anger and like neither one of us ever picked up our substances, but he strayed from the program. I was playing the part that my mother played for a long time and sort of
Uh,
enabling and doing all those things. And, and so we split. And when we got back together, the center was God. And that's what changed it. We got back together because, believe it or not, the first person that my husband called when he went after I left was a guy in recovery that he had completely removed himself from because they had had a political argument during COVID.
Okay.
I mean, this guy was one of the guys, he was one of the three guys who set us up on our first date. And they got so angry at each other that night because they were on different sides of the political spectrum that my husband basically said, "That's it, I'm never talking to him again." And my husband basically he stopped going to meetings, he stopped talking to people from recovery. And he was so angry, which is what made me leave because I lived in a lot of anger growing up. And it was kind of my breaking point where I was like, because I know what comes after anger, which is
Yeah.
violence.
Right.
And I was not doing it. So anyway, after I left, the first guy he called was this guy. And he said to my husband, "How about we go to a meeting?" And after a couple meetings together, he says to my husband, this was in December. This is a beautiful story. You're going to love this. You're going to love this. Um, it was the beginning of December. Well, I left the Sunday before Thanksgiving. I have great timing, don't I?
I'm not cooking.
And
I'm
so,
out.
like, my husband's sitting in the house all by himself with a turkey TV dinner on Thanksgiving. It's funny now. At the time, it was
Right.
not.
I'm sure.
But so anyway, so this guy then eventually says to him after they go to a couple of weeks of meetings, he says to my husband, who did not grow up in church, didn't have, any real understanding of who Jesus was. He knew who the characters were, but when I was in seminary, had zero interest in what I was doing. And this guy says to him, "Listen, my church has this really cool thing that they do during the Christmas season. On a Saturday, they have what they call a Blue Christmas service for people who are going through grief during the holidays.
Oof.
And I'd love to invite you to come to it. My worship band is playing, so I'll be there and my wife will be there, and so you'll know us." And my husband miraculously said, "Okay." Meanwhile, I'm living about an hour and a half away with my sister, and we are not communicating really at all. I mean, we've had maybe two text strings. He knows where I am, and I've stopped at the house to get mail. I mean, like we were not talking at all. And so he's at this service. Meanwhile, I'm in New Jersey in December with no treadmill in my basement anymore. So if I want to go for a walk, I have to go outside. And it was one of those, those gray Saturday afternoons in the winter that are just miserable. But I didn't
Yes.
care. My body needed to move. I had so much anxious energy. And so I was out walking and I got this nudge, and the best way to describe it is it came like sort of it was almost like a kidney punch, like that the boxers are not allowed to do, in that area.
Hmm.
And I was like, and the thought came to me, "Call your husband." And I thought to myself, maybe you should call somebody in your recovery community before you do this, because this could be dangerous, reaching out to the other and all that. And almost immediately, the little kidney push came again. "Call your husband." And I'm walking along and I have my cell phone with me. So I think, all right, I need to call my friend and talk to her about this. And a third time it came and was like, "No, call your husband." And I didn't hear this, but I felt it all through my being. I needed to do this. And so I dialed his phone and it went directly to voicemail. And I was like, "Oh, thank God," And so the voicemail ends and beep, and I just said, "Dave, I Don't know why I'm calling you other than to say I love you and I hope you're okay. That's it. And I hung up. So I was like, all right, that was weird, but I'm just going to, continue doing my walk. And about a half an hour later, my phone rings and it's him. And I answered it and I was like, hello. And he goes, he didn't even say hello. He goes, you are not going to believe what just happened. And I said, well, you know what? Try me because I just called you and told you I loved you. So I might be open to it. And he goes, I'm sitting in church, which right away I'm like, what? He goes, I'm sitting in church with Ken. And I'm like, what is happening right now? Right. And he says, and I'm bawling my eyes out because I'm at this thing they call the Blue Christmas service, and everybody's sad because everybody's dead. And I'm sitting there because everybody else that was there had lost somebody that year, And he's like, so everybody's loved ones are dead, and I'm sitting there, and my loved one's alive, but she's not with me, and I'm bawling my eyes out because I have someone who loves me, and she's not with me, and all these other people, they could have their people, but they're dead. He kept saying these people are dead, right? And he goes, and so I just decided I'm going to pray. I'm in church. That's where you pray. And so I prayed and I was like, God, if we're supposed to be together, you need to give me a sign because I need to know. I just need to know right now if we're going to be together. You need to give me a sign. And I stopped crying and I just sat there for the rest of the service. And Ken said to me, you want to meet over such and such a place for dinner? And I said, yeah. So I came out to my car to drive over there, and here's my phone with a message from you telling me you love me.
I mean, you can't make this stuff up. That's awesome.
And you know how we started talking again? He would call me. He started going to that church. Neither one of us was involved in organized religion at this time. He started going to that church every Sunday morning, and he would call me and talk to me about the sermon and ask me questions.
Wow.
And that's how we started to talk again every Sunday morning.
God is definitely involved in your life.
You think?
I mean, definitely. Yeah, all the way down to the nitty gritty.
So
Definitely
anyway, that was
involved
a
in your
really
life.
long digression from how sunbathing came to be, but that's how it came to be because I started after I moved back with him. We went through counseling and all that kind of stuff, and I moved back in, and we started really a new marriage because God was the center. He was truly the center of our marriage now. I started going to that church with him. We're now members. I got baptized. I mean, like it has been this most amazing experience where we know that God's got the plan and what we need to do is continue to follow. Hence my husband coming to me and saying, leave your job and do this because he saw me writing this and on the weekends and trying to squeeze in time to write and he's like, this is ridiculous. Why are you wasting your energy there, right? And so I did. And so I started writing it, and one of the things that I wanted to do with this book was give people a little bit of the experience that I had while I was in seminary, which was actually diving into the word myself, And so it's not just a meditation book. It's not just Jesus sayings and then me telling you what I think he meant. It's Jesus saying, I also do a thing where I show you where else you can find this particular saying. So if I list something that he said in the Gospel of Matthew, and you can also find a version of that in Luke and John, I'll put those, so you can go look at it in other places because people don't realize how important that is, that these people he was there, and there are books beyond this, right? Those are the canonized gospels, but there are gospels beyond this where they're also saying he said the same thing. Like it's just amazing how many people thought we need to write this down. This is just amazing stuff, right? So I give you that, and then after I finish the part where I write my interpretation of it, I then offer prompts, whether it's a writing prompt, a prayer prompt, a study prompt, a meditation prompt. I might want you to sit still for a minute and just sit with Jesus, right? Because you have no idea what he wants to tell you when you're just running about. And most of these books, for me anyway, I'll read it in the morning and I think, oh, this is really good stuff. And then by noon that day, I can't even remember what I read this morning because all this other stuff has happened in between. And I didn't really take the time to sit with it when I read it. And this book makes you sit with it. It
Nice.
makes you do that because the question that comes after or the prompt that comes after doesn't allow you to just get up and walk away. And that's, well, I mean, I guess you could, but someone will know that you did.
All
So,
right. I mean, so this book obviously it's encouraging people to take these paths, but you've
yes.
got actionable steps to kind of keep them involved and to do some self-exploration in it also.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
that's really
to
important.
learn what it really is. One of the things I learned when I was in seminary it's called Lectio Divina. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but it's when you take one or two verses and you either listen to them or say them out loud 3 times in a row. And then you put yourself in the setting. Pretend like you're there listening to Jesus say these words, and you meditate with it. You take time to sit with these words. Who was around you? Was it winter? Was it, were you huddled together for warmth by a fire? Was he far away? Was someone else relaying his words to you? What was it like? What did it smell like? Think about the moment when he said these words. Because when it comes right down to it, and this is something that my current spiritual teacher tells me, and this is something that my previous teacher Paul used to say to me all the time. It doesn't matter that Jesus said this 2,000 years ago. He meant it for you today. These words for you today. And because he knew you were going to be listening to them or reading them 2,000 years from then, he knew they were specifically for you. And so you need to take them that way. He's saying it directly to you. So it's not something to just take lightly and move on.
Yeah,
Find out what does he mean, and maybe ask him,
it's
what
a
do you mean
wonderful
by that?
perspective to have.
Yeah,
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 100%.
yeah.
Absolutely. I love what you're doing with this book. I guess between the two books, and I just kind of love to hear you expound on this if you don't mind. Whenever we're writing a book, we have a hope. In a perfect world, what does someone take away when they're done reading this book? And so when you look at your first book versus this book, um, what did you hope they were taking away from the first book? And how did that change with sort of the mission and the goal and the purpose of what do you hope they take away from the second book?
Yeah, that's an awesome question because they do have very different feels to them. The first one, I really wanted to share a little bit about what I learned, academically speaking, for the lay person, the person who's not going to spend or not going to get college loans to go to seminary to learn, right? So I wanted to share some of that, but I also wanted to share my story of rebirth, my story of uh, dying to that thing, whatever inside of me that was keeping me from living free. When Jesus promised eternal life, he didn't mean just when we got to heaven or whatever you want to call it. He meant you could have this right now. My
Yeah.
peace, I'm leaving with you here now, right? It's for today. And I didn't know that when I was growing up. When I was growing up, I heard when you get to heaven, things will be good. Until then, it's going to suck. But I mean, nobody said that.
But that's what I heard.
No, you know what I mean. You know what I mean. Until then, it's going to be hard, and which is true. But walking through those hard times, right? You can still have peace if you're truly following Jesus, believing in Jesus, hoping in Jesus, looking to Jesus. You know, when Simon Peter was walking across the water, why did he start to sink into the water? Because he took his eyes off of Jesus, right? I mean, it's pretty simply put in front of us. We're the ones who complicate it. You know, I complicate the crap out of it. And so that was the idea with the first one, was to let people know that there's hope no matter how dark you're of a world you're living in today, no matter what you've done, no matter what you've said or who you've harmed, no matter how much you've harmed yourself or turned your back on God, none of it matters. Think of the thief on the cross. He knew nothing. He knew nothing about religion. He didn't know the doctrine of faith. You know, he never taught Sunday school, but Jesus said, "Come with me," because he looked to him and he believed him. He believed who he was, and he said, I want to be with you." That was it. And if that guy gets to go, why not me? Why not you? Why not the person on the street who's got a needle in their arm today? You know, or even the murderer, you know, who is out there, killing people today. You know, why not that person? And so there's nothing you can do. And that's what that book was all about. It was giving people a place to land with some hope that yeah, I can have this eternal life. Yes, it's hard and I have to make some changes in my life,
Yeah.
right? Because following Jesus is not something you can do if you got a lot of barnacles. You know, you've got to scrape away those barnacles, and that is not easy for a lot of people to do. It wasn't easy for me to do because a lot of those barnacles I discovered were my own. It was my ego, my pride, my selfishness. Those were the things that were keeping me chained to the resentments that I had from when I was growing up. You know,
Yeah.
um, there's a great saying in one of my recovery programs where they say you get to be a victim until you're 18. After that, you're a volunteer. And
Yeah.
it's that's recovery.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, I was born into, like I said, a family that was diseased with
Yeah.
alcoholism on both sides. It came down through both sides, right? So, yeah, I was born into that. So you could say I was born a victim, right? But once I got to a place where I was becoming, I was becoming an adult, I had the information, the tools that I needed to not be a victim anymore. You know, it took me another 11 years till, I finally surrendered after I turned 18. But it takes what it takes for every single one of us. And so that's what that book was about, just giving people a place to land with hope. This one, and it's a pretty cool story too. Even though it's my own, I'll just say it's a pretty cool story because God's all over the place. You can see him all over the place in that,
Yeah.
in the way, like we were talking earlier, the people he put in my life to help me get there. Um, this book, I want people to start reading the Bible in a different way. I want people to stop parroting back what they hear their minister say. Not that ministers aren't great, because they are. They're wonderful, right? But don't watch a podcast and then just go parrot back what the person said about Jesus. Hear what the person said, and then go read those verses for yourself. What does it mean to you, right? For me, when I started doing that, like I said, you're going to fall in love with Jesus. He loves you so much. He loves you so much. It makes me want to cry. How much like when you start really digging into it and you see and hear the things that he said and did to show love to this world at a time that was just as bad as now, right? I mean, we may have a lot of advancements as far as technology and everything, but we're still a freaking train wreck, you know, and he still loves us. And it's right there on all the pages. And all you got to do is get in there. One thing I will say that has really helped me a lot in my own journey beyond the schooling, okay? There are two Bibles that I have, there are three Bibles that I have to say. The first one is the Women's Devotional Bible. It's peppered with wisdom from amazing women all along the way. So there'll be like a different writer or a different piece from a different female author, next to the book of Psalms, or within the Gospel of John or whatever, and you learn from different women how they have received the word in this particular area. It's beautiful for any woman of faith. I highly recommend it. So it's the Women's Devotional Bible. Um, then for people who are recovering from addiction, who are interested in getting closer to God, getting closer to Jesus, there's the Life Recovery Bible, which has footnotes at the bottom. It has sidebars. It relates everything you're reading to recovery. Because if you look at the principles in recovery of the 12 steps and the 12 traditions, it all leads back there. I mean, it all, in fact, my husband and I went to, in Akron, Ohio, is where one of the co-founders of Alcoholics Anonymous lived. And it's where the other co-founder and he met. They met in Akron
Hmm.
way back in 1930 something. And they started the program there. They started meeting there. And the church that they used to have their first meeting still has a meeting every Wednesday night at the same time that those original guys had it. And before they wrote their own literature, they used a Bible to start their meetings. And they have it at that meeting now in Akron, Ohio, under a plexiglass, is that original Bible with their two signatures, their first name and their initial, and the third guy who joined them in that first year. So it all comes from there,
Yeah.
you know? And why did I start telling you that? Just because that's really cool that you can go see that Bible. So it
That's all
all
right.
comes from there. And it just, the Life Recovery Bible. And so that Bible was the one that I picked up after I graduated from seminary. Someone introduced me to that Life Recovery, and it is awesome. Currently, I am at the feet of a new spiritual teacher who has directed me to the Orthodox Study Bible. So this
Hmm.
is Orthodox Christianity, which was before Catholicism. It was, sort of the apostolic. I have a hard time saying these words. The tradition of the apostles.
Right.
That's what I'm trying to say. So that's where the Eastern Orthodox Church came from, the tradition of the apostles. And so this is Eastern Orthodox Christianity. It's called the Septuagint, which comes from the Greek word 70. So the Old Testament in this Bible is 70 books,
Okay.
which is significantly bigger than the Protestant Bible.
Yeah.
And then the New Testament, the same. But at the bottom of this, at the bottom of the pages, they have the same thing, footnotes. So if something confuses you, or if you read something and you go, what the heck does that mean? Because I mean, that happens to me a lot when I'm reading the Bible. I'm going, what the heck I mean, in Leviticus, what are they talking about? And so, but there'll be little footnotes that help you to understand what was going on at the time, what the culture was, and it helps it to make sense, to where you are today, and you
Right.
can relate the symbol to it.
Got
Yeah.
it. All right. Well,
So that's the point of this book.
I was going to say, I appreciate you laying that out for both the books
Yeah,
because
yeah,
that really was what I wanted to know, and I appreciate
yeah,
you going to great lengths to do that because you know that you know they're different, and now you know why and how,
yeah,
which
yeah.
I think is really important. The newest book, of course, it's out now, right?
Yes, it just
Yeah.
was released in April.
Okay. Excellent.
I went through Westbow Publishing this time, which is the self-publishing arm of Thomas Nelson,
Uh,
which, if you know anything about Bibles, you know that Thomas Nelson is the biggest publisher in the world of Bibles and Bible materials. And so getting in the door with Westbow, I'm hoping that helps me in the future,
nice.
and I also know I can trust the name,
For
you
sure.
know. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on that too.
Thank you. Thank
That's
you.
awesome. That bodes well
Yeah.
for all of the other books that are coming, because I know you're not just going to stop with these two and your book of
Okay.
poetry. So I'm
Yeah.
sure there's a lot more.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. All right. Listen, I could talk to you all day, but unfortunately, I have to kind of wrap things up a little bit here. I do have another question for you. And before I get to that, though, I want to make sure that I'm getting out to everybody. How do they find you? How do they find the books? Contact you if
Ye-
that's available, the whole bit.
Yeah. Everything you need to know about me and my books and spiritual direction and even a contact page is on my website. It's just jessicalmorris.com.
Okay.
So it's my
Perfect.
name with my middle initial. And I post a little bit on social media, but I'm really trying to pull back from social media just because it's like everything else, tends to be a little addictive. And I don't want to keep going back and looking for likes. I'm not doing this for likes.
Gotcha.
And I have to sometimes remind myself of that. And so it's safer for me to just kind of post my blog and move on.
I understand. I really
Yeah,
do. I get it,
yeah, yeah,
especially with everything that you've overcome. I totally
yeah,
understand
yeah.
where you are there. My last question for you in all of this is, I mean, you've come so far, and you've really come from the point of that self discovery, which I know is always still going on, but the self discovery, the re-immersion, into your faith, the growth that you've experienced. And every step along the way, you're teaching people and you're helping guide people. And I think that's fantastic that you're doing that. So I'm going to ask you to do it one last time.
Okay.
People who listen to this program very often are wanting to express themselves, wanting to sort of wake up the lion that
Mhm.
they have. They're wanting to share their testimony. They're wanting to help disciple, all sorts of stuff, but they just have trouble taking that step sometimes. What we do here is we try to bring on people like you who are doing that and are leading by example to motivate them to, maybe come out, make them feel a little safer, like, hey, you're not the only one out here.
Yeah.
But there's still so many people who are just sitting at home kind of scared. What
Mhm.
is one thing you can tell them to say, hey, maybe start here? If this is what you want to do, here's a good first step or a way to start because you've been down this path and you can speak from authority on this.
Yeah. Uh, saying who you are in the world we live in today, when you're a Christ follower, is not always easy.
Right.
Uh, I can tell you that when you start saying it, though, you can't stop. And so the reason I share that is because I I struggled where I worked more than anything before I left my job with things like I worked at a institution of higher education, and I struggled with things like finding out from a friend who worked in the publications office that they were um, airbrushing crosses off of girls' chests in publication pictures, but allowing I don't know what that's called when the woman wears the head covering.
Yeah, the Habib
The
thing. Yeah,
Habib,
right.
allowing them in the picture with no problem. And when the pandemic happened, and I'm just sharing this because it's important.
Mhm.
Um, I had been 4 years free of cancer at that point, and they started talking about this vaccine. And my husband was going down rabbit holes that of conspiracy that some people probably should never go down, right? But at the same time was getting some information, was saying, we can't take this, we can't take this. And I also have a sister who's a doctor who was saying, you got to take this, you got to take this, so I had these voices, So I called my doctor, who had been my doctor for probably 30 years at that point. And she is also a good woman of faith. Like I know that about her just because I've known her for a long time. And so I called her and I said, here's a situation. They're not making us take it at work, but it's very uncomfortable not having taken it. So I want to know from you what I should do. And at the time, if you said openly, if you were in the medical field and you said openly, don't take the vaccine, you probably got fired. And so she said to me, please don't tell anybody I told you this. And then she said, you've had cancer, and everything that I have researched in regards to this tells me that people who've had cancer, who are free of cancer now, are still vulnerable to getting cancer, and that this vaccine will block your system from allowing it to fight cancer.
Wow.
And she said, so I will say that to you. And I will also say to you that I have been your doctor for a long time. You're a very healthy woman. You take care of yourself. You eat right. You exercise. If you were to get COVID, I think that your body would be able to handle it and you'd be able to move on. And that's all I'm going to say about that. And I heard her loud and clear. And I did not take the vaccine. And I got a lot of flack. And the more flack that I got at my job, the more I leaned in to Jesus. And the more I realized I need people to know that this isn't necessarily about me making a political stand. This is about me trusting Jesus. And so I started saying it. I started saying, you know what? I know God will care for me no matter what happens. And I believe with all my heart that I'm not meant to have this in my body. And people don't know what to say to that. And they turn around and walk away. I had one person actually tell me that I was going to kill somebody's grandmother because I was going to be a carrier and I was going to carry it to their
Right.
grandma. And, and when it comes right down to it, that experience, as difficult as it was, I learned how to talk to people without being self-righteous. I learned how to share my belief about something without condemning theirs. These are not easy things to do. And God gave me what that part in Acts, in the book of Acts, where um, God says, don't worry about what you're going to say before you get there. I'll give you the words.
Sure.
It's so true. It is so true. If you trust and you follow, and this is the one thing I will say to anybody who's interested in expressing themselves for God, create a time in your morning. I know some people are not morning people, but I'm going to say this. Create a time in your morning before you leave your house to go be with these crazy people out there in the world, right? Or if you work from home, create the time before you turn the computer on to sit with God and to create and deepen that relationship with God so that you do have the faith that he will give you the words. You do have the faith that you're following his will. You've got, that's where it starts. Anything that you want to express out there to the world about God and your own testimony for God, it's going to be given to you through that relationship. So that's got to be the strongest relationship in your life, bar none. So that's what I would say. And then ask for help. If there's people all over the world doing what you want to do, and a lot of them are willing to talk to you and say, here's how I got to where I am.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know if I told you this last time, but I'll just briefly tell you that in 2004, way before, like I was in my fifth year of recovery, I was reading a book by Dean Koontz. Do you know Dean
Oh yeah.
Koontz?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So I read a lot in early recovery because it kept me busy. And I was reading this book, and he wrote about a character, something she was thinking in her head in the moment. It was a religious superstition that I had my whole life that I had never heard anybody else in the whole world ever say. He said, it said, Molly refrained from praying for her perverse superstition that as soon as God knew what she wanted, he'd keep it from her. I believed that my whole life. I never prayed for anything I really wanted because I thought if God knows I want this, he'll keep it from me.
Wow.
I immediately wrote a letter to Dean Koontz and I said to him, I know you're an old guy in California, but you just said something that this young woman here in Pennsylvania has been thinking her whole life, and it blew me away. And I needed you to know you gave me an opportunity to be normal for a minute. And I'm so grateful and I thank you so much. He wrote me back a handwritten letter within like 2 weeks and directed me to other books to read
Oh wow.
about he directed me to C.S. Lewis. Dean Koontz directed me to C.S. Lewis. Are you kidding me? And that was my beginning journey. C.S. Lewis was one of the
Yep.
reasons I went to seminary. You never know what reaching out to another person is going to bring you in life.
There you go.
So
Love that.
just, yeah, stop being afraid. Just start living it. Just start living it.
Love it. I knew you were going to go somewhere great. I had no idea we were going to get that. I mean, from a COVID story to Dean Koontz and C.S. Lewis, nobody else, Jessica. No, nobody else is going to give me that on my program. I am so glad you came back. Thank you so much for coming back for a return engagement to tell all of our listeners, about your new book and about how you're doing. Folks, you have to go check out the book, Sunbathing, Basking in the Word of God by Jessica L. Morris, and look her up on jessicalmorris.com. Jessica, thank you for being here and for sharing everything you did, and honestly, just for supporting us since moment one.
Thank you for having me back. It was wonderful to be with you today.
Thank you. Folks, that's been another just absolutely fantastic episode of Wake Up the Lions because it is time. It's time to wake up the lions. And more than that, it's time for you to take your rightful place with your brothers and your sisters and let them hear you roar. The world is ready. You're ready. You just have to believe it.
Mhm.